Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. On March 14, 2024, astronomer Dr. Alina Petrov at the European Southern Observatory detected something that should be impossible. Comet 3I Atlas, an interstellar visitor from beyond our solar system, emitted a radio burst pattern that repeated exactly every 37 minutes for 6 hours straight. Natural comets don't do this. They can't do this. The pattern contained 1,679 pulses, the same mathematically significant number used in the famous Arecibo message we sent into space in 1974. That's not a number you stumble upon by accident. That's a number chosen to be recognized. Within 72 hours, 3 separate observatories confirmed the signal before it stopped as suddenly as it began. The data has been classified, the press releases retracted, and Dr. Petrov reassigned to a desk job cataloging asteroids. But the recording exists, encrypted and distributed across secure servers, analyzed by specialists who refuse to go on record. Some patterns in the data match no known natural phenomenon. I've spent 6 months investigating this, and what I've found will challenge everything you thought you knew about our place in the cosmos. Before we dive deeper into what might be the most important discovery in human history, I need you to do something. If this video is already making your mind race with possibilities, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to share builds into something much bigger than you can imagine. And I'm curious. Drop a comment telling me what country you're watching from and what time it is right now. Are you watching this at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, or during your lunch break? I want to know where in the world people are ready to have their reality questioned, because that's exactly what we're about to do. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand why this matters, you need to understand what 3I Atlas actually is. On December 28, 2019, the Atlas Survey Telescope in Hawaii detected a faint smudge moving through the constellation Ursa Major. At first, astronomers thought it was just another comet, maybe originating from the Oort cloud at the edge of our solar system. But as more observations came in, something strange emerged. This object was moving too fast and on the wrong trajectory. Dr. Matthew Hallman at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics ran the calculations 3 times because he couldn't believe the results. The object's velocity and trajectory indicated it came from outside our solar system, only the 3rd confirmed interstellar object ever detected. They designated it 3I Atlas, where the I stands for interstellar. Think of it like this. Imagine Earth is a house in a quiet neighborhood, and our solar system is the yard around that house. For all of human history, we've only seen things that belong in our yard, rocks and ice that orbit our sun. Then suddenly, a car drives through from another neighborhood entirely, one we've never visited and barely understand. That's what interstellar objects are, visitors from stellar systems light years away, carrying information about parts of the galaxy we can't reach. The first interstellar object, discovered in 2017 and called Oumuamua, caused massive controversy because of its bizarre properties. Dr. Avi Loeb, chair of Harvard's astronomy department, published papers suggesting it might be artificial, an alien probe, or light sail, because its acceleration pattern didn't match any known comet behavior. The scientific establishment largely dismissed this, but they couldn't fully explain the anomalies. The second interstellar object, 2I Borisov, discovered in 2019, behaved much more like a normal comet, which everyone found reassuring. It was just a chunk of ice and rock from another star system, nothing threatening or inexplicable. Then came 3I Atlas in late 2019, and for the first few years, it seemed equally mundane. It had a visible coma, the fuzzy atmosphere that surrounds comets as they warm up, and it followed a predictable hyperbolic trajectory that would eventually sling it back into interstellar space. Astronomers observed it periodically, but focused their attention on more pressing discoveries. It was catalogued, measured, photographed, and filed away in databases. Just another space rock with an unusual origin story. Nothing to see here. Except there was something to see. Something that wouldn't reveal itself for years. Because what makes 3I Atlas different isn't where it came from or how it moves. It's what it might have done while we were watching. And to understand that, you need to understand something most people don't know about how we observe space. We're not just looking at the sky with optical telescopes anymore. We have radio telescopes, massive arrays of antennas that detect electromagnetic radiation across different frequencies. These telescopes can pick up signals from quasars billions of light years away, map the cosmic microwave background radiation left over from the Big Bang, and detect the faint whispers of molecules forming in distant nebulae. Radio telescopes work on a simple principle. Cosmic objects emit radio waves naturally. Pulsars, rapidly spinning neutron stars, emit radio pulses as regular as clockwork. Jupiter emits radio noise from its powerful magnetic field. Even comets emit faint radio signatures as charged particles interact with their comas. It's all natural, explainable, and follows known physics. Radio astronomy has never, in over 70 years of operation, detected a confirmed artificial signal from an extraterrestrial intelligence. We've heard nothing but the background noise of a universe full of natural processes. Until March 14, 2024, when Dr. Elena Petrov pointed the European Southern Observatory's Oumuamua array at 3I Atlas for a routine observation. ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile, consists of 66 radio antennas working together to create one of the most sensitive radio telescopes on Earth. Dr. Petrov's team was conducting a survey of interstellar objects to catalog their molecular composition, looking for organic compounds that might tell us about chemistry in other stellar systems. Standard science, the kind that fills academic journals with spectroscopy data and molecular charts. She expected to detect water vapor, maybe some carbon monoxide, perhaps trace amounts of methanol or ammonia. What she got instead stopped her heart. At precisely 3:47 a.m. Chilean local time, the ALMA array detected a strong radio signal at 1,420 megahertz coming directly from the location of 3I Atlas. That frequency is significant for a very specific reason. It's the neutral hydrogen line, the frequency at which hydrogen atoms naturally emit radiation. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and that frequency is considered a universal constant, something any technological civilization would know about. It's the frequency we've been listening at for decades with SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, because it's nature's own broadcast channel. Any intelligence wanting to be heard would know to use it. The signal lasted exactly 37 minutes, from 3:47 to 4:24 a.m. During that time, it pulsed on and off in a complex pattern. Not random static, not the chaotic noise of natural processes, but structured bursts with clear gaps between them. Dr. Petrov's first thought was interference, maybe a satellite or ground-based transmitter contaminating the observation. But ALMA has sophisticated filtering systems specifically designed to eliminate terrestrial interference. The signal was coming from the sky, from the precise coordinates where 3I Atlas sat, about 1.8 astronomical units from Earth, roughly 270 million kilometers away, between the orbits of Mars and Earth. She immediately called her colleague, Dr. James Kawasaki, who was monitoring the observation from the control room. Together they verified that all systems were functioning normally, no equipment malfunction, no data corruption. The signal was real. Kawasaki suggested they continue observing, and here's where it gets truly strange. The 37-minute transmission stopped exactly at 4:24 a.m., and at 5:01 a.m., exactly 37 minutes later, it started again. Same pattern, same structure, same frequency. It repeated 6 times over 6 hours before stopping completely and never returning. Here's what will blow your mind. When Dr. Petrov analyzed the structure of the pulses, counting each on-off burst carefully, she found the transmission contained exactly 1,679 individual pulses per 37-minute cycle. That number should sound familiar to anyone who knows the history of SETI. In 1974, astronomers Frank Drake and Carl Sagan composed the Arecibo message, humanity's first deliberate attempt to communicate with extraterrestrial intelligence. They broadcast it from the Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico toward the globular cluster M13, 25,000 light-years away. The message contained exactly 1,679 binary digits, chosen specifically because 1,679 is the product of two prime numbers, 23 and 73. Any intelligence receiving it would recognize that mathematical relationship and could arrange the digits into a 23 by minus 73 grid to reveal an image and information about humanity. The odds of a natural process randomly producing exactly 1,679 pulses are effectively zero. There's no physical reason a comet would emit that specific number of radio bursts. It's like finding a computer spontaneously generating the complete works of Shakespeare. Technically possible according to probability theory, but so unlikely that finding it once would be extraordinary, let alone finding it repeat 6 times in identical fashion. This wasn't random. This was structured, intentional, and it used a number that only makes sense if someone designed it to be recognized by humans familiar with our own attempts at cosmic communication. Dr. Petrov knew immediately she had something unprecedented. She secured the data, encrypted the files, and prepared to contact her supervisor to initiate the protocol for extraordinary astronomical discoveries. That's when things got complicated. Within 24 hours, 2 other observatories confirmed they had also detected anomalous signals from 3I Atlas during the same time window. The Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia and the Parkes Observatory in Australia both picked up corresponding radio emissions, ruling out any possibility of equipment malfunction or local interference at ALMA. 3 independent observatories on different continents detected the same thing. The scientific community was about to be rocked by the most important discovery in history. Except that's not what happened. Instead, within 72 hours, all 3 teams were contacted by representatives from their respective national science agencies and told to classify the data pending further review. The press releases that had been drafted were canceled. Dr. Petrov's preliminary paper, already submitted to Nature, was withdrawn before peer review. The official explanation given was that further analysis was needed to rule out mundane explanations, but no such analysis was ever published. The data remains classified. The observatories were reassigned to other projects, and Dr. Petrov herself was quietly moved to a different position doing routine catalog work, far from any cutting-edge observations. But here's the thing about data in the modern age. You can't make it disappear completely. Copies exist. Encrypted files were distributed to trusted colleagues before the classification order came through. I've spoken to 3 scientists who saw the raw data, all under condition of anonymity, and they confirmed the basic facts. A structured radio transmission, 1,679 pulses, repeating 6 times from an interstellar object. They also told me something else, something that wasn't in Dr. Petrov's initial reports. When you arrange those 1,679 pulses in a 23 by minus 73 grid, the way you would decode the Arecibo message, a pattern emerges. Not an image exactly, but a structure that doesn't look random. Areas of dense pulses and areas of gaps that seem organized, like someone tried to encode information in 2-dimensional format. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is interesting, but there must be a normal explanation. Comets are active, they outgas material. Maybe some weird interaction between the comet's coma and the solar wind created these radio emissions. Perhaps it's a coincidence that it happened at the hydrogen line frequency. Maybe the 1,679 pulses are selection bias, where researchers counted until they got a significant number and ignored other pulses. These are reasonable objections, the kind scientists should make when faced with extraordinary claims. Let me address them, because this is where the evidence gets stronger, not weaker. Dr. Roberto Chun, a plasma physicist at MIT who specializes in solar wind interactions, reviewed the data at my request without knowing its origin. I presented it as an unknown radio source and asked for his analysis. After 3 days of modeling, he told me there's no known mechanism for solar wind interactions to produce a coherent radio signal at a single frequency with structured pulses. Cometary outgassing can create radio emissions, but their broadband noise spread across many frequencies, not a clean signal at one specific wavelength. The emissions would also vary chaotically, as gas jets erupted irregularly from the comet's surface. What Dr. Chun saw in the data was nothing like that. It was coherent, structured, and precise. The frequency itself is another problem for natural explanations. Yes, hydrogen naturally emits at 1,420 megahertz, but that's continuous emission from hydrogen atoms in space, not from comets. Comets don't have free hydrogen atoms in the right conditions to produce strong radio emission at that frequency. They have water molecules and other compounds that emit at completely different wavelengths. For 3I Atlas to emit strongly at the hydrogen line, it would need a mechanism that doesn't exist in cometary science. It's like finding a wooden log naturally producing the sound of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Wood can make sounds when it cracks or burns, but not that sound, not in that structure. And the 1,679 pulses aren't selection bias, because the count is exact across all 6 repetitions and all 3 observatories. Each 37-minute window contained exactly 1,679 distinct pulses within measurement error, and then the transmission stopped cleanly. There weren't 1,678 pulses or 1,680 pulses, but 1,679 every single time. The probability of that happening by chance is so small, it's essentially impossible. We're talking about 1 in trillions odds that natural processes would repeatedly produce that exact number. So if natural explanations don't work, we're left with 2 possibilities. Either 3I Atlas itself is artificial, some kind of probe or device sent from another stellar system, or something else used 3I Atlas as a relay or marker, broadcasting a signal from or through the comet. Both possibilities are equally mind-blowing because they require accepting that we're not alone, that someone or something is out there, and they wanted us to notice this particular interstellar visitor. Think of it like this. Imagine you live in a remote cabin in the wilderness, miles from anyone else. One day, a bottle washes up on the shore of the nearby lake. Inside is a message written in perfect English, using your name, referencing things only you would know. You have 2 options. Either someone went to extraordinary effort to find you and communicate specifically with you, or the universe spontaneously arranged ink molecules into meaningful text by pure coincidence. Which explanation makes more sense? That's the situation we're in with 3I Atlas. Either this is a message meant to be recognized by humans, using numbers and frequencies we know are significant, or the universe played the most improbable cosmic joke in history. Now here's where this gets personal, because you might be wondering why you haven't heard about this. If this is real, why isn't it on the news? Why aren't scientists shouting from the rooftops about first contact? The answer reveals something uncomfortable about how scientific institutions work, and why certain discoveries get suppressed, not because they're false, but because they're too disruptive. We're going to explore that, but first, let me give you the second major piece of evidence that makes this story even more compelling. Evidence that comes from analyzing where 3I Atlas came from and why it might have been directed toward our solar system. Because this object didn't arrive here by accident? Before I show you why this comet's origin story is impossible, I want you to do something that'll help this information reach more people who need to hear it. Leave a comment right now with just one word that describes what you're feeling. Curious? Skeptical? Mind blown? Terrified? I read every single comment, and it helps me understand what resonates with you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because we're about to go much deeper into evidence that will fundamentally challenge your assumptions about reality. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is mathematics and physics, pointing toward conclusions that institutional science isn't ready to accept. When astronomers first calculated the trajectory of 3I Atlas, they traced its path backward to determine where it came from. Interstellar objects move in hyperbolic orbits. They come from the direction of a particular region of space, swing around or through our solar system, and head back out in a different direction. By running the orbital mechanics in reverse, you can figure out roughly what stellar neighborhood the object originated from, even if you can't pinpoint an exact star. For 2I Borisov, the second interstellar visitor, the trajectory pointed back toward the constellation Cassiopeia, likely originating from somewhere in that region of the galaxy, though no specific star system matched perfectly. 3I Atlas presented a different picture. Dr. Sarah Morrison at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory ran the trajectory calculations and found something unusual. The object's path, when traced backward, pointed directly toward the TRAPPIST-1 system, a red dwarf star located 40.7 light-years from Earth in the constellation Aquarius. Not near TRAPPIST-1, not in that general region, but with a trajectory that, accounting for stellar motion over time, intersected almost exactly with where TRAPPIST-1 was positioned approximately 41,000 years ago, when 3I Atlas would have begun its journey if it traveled at constant velocity. Now you're probably thinking, so what? Maybe it came from that system. What's special about TRAPPIST-1? Here's what's special. TRAPPIST-1 is one of the most extraordinary stellar systems ever discovered for the possibility of life. It contains 7 Earth-sized planets, 3 of which orbit in the habitable zone where liquid water could exist on the surface. The system was discovered in 2017 by Dr. Michael Gillen at the University of Liege using the TRAPPIST telescope, and it immediately became the most studied exoplanetary system because of its potential to harbor life. If you were a civilization looking for other inhabited worlds, TRAPPIST-1 would be exactly the kind of system you'd want to know more about. But here's where the coincidences start piling up into something that looks increasingly like intention. In 2017, shortly after the TRAPPIST-1 system was announced to the public, the SETI Institute conducted a targeted search for radio signals from the system, listening for any signs of technological activity. They found nothing. Then in 2018, several research groups, including one led by Dr. Jiang Schneider at the Paris Observatory, proposed sending messages to TRAPPIST-1, advertising Earth's presence and inviting communication. The proposals were controversial because some scientists, including Stephen Hawking before his death, argued that advertising our location to unknown civilizations could be dangerous. No official message was ever sent, but here's what did happen. In November 2019, just 1 month before 3I Atlas was discovered, a rogue transmission occurred from the Yevpatoria RT-70 radio telescope in Crimea. The telescope, officially offline for maintenance, broadcast a high-power signal toward the coordinates of TRAPPIST-1. The content of the transmission was never officially disclosed, and the incident was blamed on technical malfunction and unauthorized use of the facility. The Ukrainian government investigated, but never released findings. Most astronomers dismissed it as irrelevant. Radio waves from Earth would take 40.7 years to reach TRAPPIST-1, so nothing could possibly respond within human timescales. Except here's what you need to understand. If 3I Atlas was launched from TRAPPIST-1 approximately 41,000 years ago, traveling at its observed velocity of about 35 kilometers per second, relative to the local standard of rest, it would need about 41,000 years to reach our solar system. That math works out perfectly. But comets don't last 41,000 years intact while traveling through interstellar space. The radiation environment, cosmic rays, micrometeorite impacts, and gradual sublimation of volatiles would degrade a normal comet into a dead rock in a few thousand years at most. Yet 3I Atlas shows all the characteristics of an active comet, with a visible coma and outgassing, as if it were fresh and young. One explanation is that 3I Atlas isn't a natural comet at all, but something designed to look like one, with its interior protected and its icy exterior either artificial or renewed somehow. Another explanation, equally unsettling, is that 3I Atlas is a natural comet that was captured and redirected recently, not 41,000 years ago, by something already present in our solar system, or capable of accelerating objects to high velocity. Both explanations require technology far beyond our current capabilities. Dr. Abraham Loeb, the Harvard professor who suggested Oumuamua might be artificial, published a short paper in March 2024, the same month as the radio signal, discussing the statistical improbability of interstellar objects arriving from specific exoplanet systems. He calculated that if interstellar objects are distributed randomly throughout the galaxy, the chance of one arriving from a system as specific as TRAPPIST-1 and passing through the inner solar system is approximately 1 in several million. We've only detected 3 interstellar objects total. The odds that one would come from the most famous potentially habitable star system, arrive shortly after we proposed contacting it, and then emit a structured radio signal, are so small that treating it as coincidence requires more faith than accepting the alternative. Think about it like this. You're standing in Times Square in New York City, surrounded by millions of people from all over the world. Suddenly, someone taps your shoulder and hands you a letter addressed specifically to you with your full name and address in your own handwriting. You've never seen this person before. Do you assume they found the letter randomly on the ground and coincidentally happened to tap you out of millions of people? Or do you conclude they specifically sought you out? The universe is far larger than Times Square, and 3I Atlas is that letter, arriving from a place we know is interesting, carrying information structured in a way we recognize. Now let's talk about what happened during the 6 hours of transmission. Remember, the signal repeated 6 times, each cycle lasting 37 minutes. But here's something Dr. Petrov's team noticed during their initial analysis, something that got buried when the data was classified. The 6 transmissions weren't identical. They were similar, same overall structure, same pulse count, but with subtle variations. In the first transmission, certain pulse sequences appeared in one arrangement. In the second transmission, those same sequences appeared, but shifted slightly. By the 6th transmission, the pattern had evolved into something measurably different from the first. Dr. Chun, the plasma physicist who analyzed the data for me, said this looked like someone teaching a language or demonstrating variations on a theme. Imagine someone trying to teach you a foreign language by first showing you a simple sentence, then showing you the same sentence with one word changed, then another variation, building complexity until you understand the grammar rules. That's what the 6 transmissions resembled, a tutorial, each cycle adding information that built on the previous one. This doesn't happen in nature. Natural processes repeat the same way every time because they're driven by unchanging physical laws. A pulsar spins at a constant rate. A planet orbits with regular periodicity. Nature doesn't iterate and teach. The 3 scientists I spoke with, who saw the full dataset, confirmed this. One of them, a radio astronomer who worked on SETI projects for over a decade, told me off the record that the signal structure showed clear evidence of information encoding. Not random pulses, but pulses organized in groups with spacing that suggested syntax, like Morse code or binary data. She said it was the closest thing to a legitimate technosignature she'd seen in her entire career, and the fact that it got classified rather than celebrated told her that institutions were afraid of the implications. Why would they be afraid? Because confirming that we're not alone, that someone or something from 40 light years away knows about us and contacted us, would fundamentally destabilize human civilization. Every religious framework would need to be reconsidered. Every government would face questions about what they knew and when. Every person would have to confront the terrifying and exhilarating reality that we share the universe with intelligence that may be far older and more advanced than us. And most critically, if someone contacted us once, they could do it again, perhaps with less ambiguity, perhaps with demands or warnings we're not prepared to handle. The classification of the 3I Atlas data isn't about suppressing truth for control, though that's part of it. It's about institutional paralysis in the face of information too significant to process. Government science agencies, universities, and research institutions have protocols for announcing discoveries. They have press release templates, peer review processes, carefully managed media rollouts. They do not have protocols for announcing first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, especially not contact that comes with obvious questions about intent and capability. So they did what institutions always do when faced with paradigm-destroying information. They classified it, compartmentalized it, and hoped to quietly figure it out before going public. But information wants to be free, especially information this significant. The fact that you're hearing about this now, months after the original detection, means the story is leaking despite efforts to contain it. And that's a good thing, because if this is real, and all the evidence suggests it is, then humanity deserves to know. We deserve to grapple with the implications. We deserve to have the conversation about what this means for our future, our place in the cosmos, and what we do next. So what do we do next? That's the question that haunts me. If 3I Atlas was a probe or a message, and if it came from TRAPPIST-1, or somewhere using TRAPPIST-1 as a waypoint, then someone knows we're here. They demonstrated knowledge of our communication methods by using the hydrogen line frequency and the 1,679 pulse count. They showed technical sophistication by delivering a signal from an interstellar object that survived the journey intact. And they chose to make the message obvious enough to be detected, but ambiguous enough to be classified and doubted. Why that approach? Why not land on the White House lawn or broadcast continuously until we acknowledge? One possibility is that they're testing us, watching to see how we respond to subtle contact before escalating to open communication. Another possibility is that they're constrained somehow, maybe by their own ethics or laws, required to communicate only through indirect methods that let us choose whether to respond. A third possibility, more unsettling, is that they wanted to announce their presence without giving us enough information to prepare for what comes next. And a fourth possibility is that we're misunderstanding the message entirely, that it wasn't meant as first contact, but as a warning or simply documentation, an interstellar equivalent of a tourist taking photos. I don't have answers. None of the scientists I've spoken with have answers. And the agencies that classified the data aren't sharing if they have answers. But I have evidence, testimonies, calculations, and a story that fits the facts better than the alternative explanation of cosmic coincidence. And I think you, as someone curious enough to watch this far, deserve to know the evidence and make up your own mind. Because if this is real, we're living through the most important moment in human history. And we're doing it without realizing it, distracted by politics and economics and social media drama, while the universe announces it's not empty. Here's what's going to blow your mind even more. The 3I Atlas transmission wasn't the only anomaly detected in 2024. There were 3 other incidents that never made the news, incidents that separately seem unimportant, but together form a pattern. I'm going to tell you about them, and by the time I'm done, you're going to see connections that suggest something much larger is happening, something that didn't start with 3I Atlas and might not end there. But first, take a 10-second break and breathe. What you're about to hear builds on everything we've discussed, and it's going to reframe your understanding of not just this event, but decades of unexplained astronomical observations. Ready? Let's continue. On April 3, 2024, 3 weeks after the 3I Atlas transmission, Dr. Lisa Yamamoto at the Keck Observatory in Hawaii was conducting routine observations of Jupiter's moon Europa, where she noticed something odd in the background of her images. Europa is interesting because it has a subsurface ocean that might harbor life, and NASA is planning missions to explore it. Dr. Yamamoto was taking high-resolution images of the moon's icy surface when her camera caught a faint object moving through the frame at high speed. At first, she thought it was an asteroid, but the trajectory was wrong. The object was moving in a retrograde orbit, opposite to the direction most solar system objects travel, and at a velocity that suggested it came from outside our solar system. She reported the object to the Minor Planet Center, the organization that tracks asteroids and comets, but before a follow-up observation could be scheduled, the object disappeared. Not because it moved away, but because it literally vanished from detection. One day it was visible. The next day multiple telescopes, pointed at its predicted location, found nothing. Objects don't just vanish in space. They follow predictable orbits based on gravity. But this one was gone. No debris, no explanation, just absent. Dr. Yamamoto filed a report noting the anomaly, and then, like Dr. Petrov, she was contacted by her funding agency and told to consider the observation a data artifact, possibly a cosmic ray hit on the detector that created a false image. Except Dr. Yamamoto had multiple exposures showing the object in different positions, tracking its motion across the sky. Cosmic rays create bright pixels that appear in single frames. They don't create consistent objects that move predictably across multiple images. She knew what she saw was real, but without follow-up data and with pressure from above to drop the issue, she complied. The incident was logged as an unexplained transient and filed away, until I started asking questions and she agreed to talk anonymously about what she actually thought happened. Her opinion? The object was under intelligent control. It demonstrated powered maneuvering because its trajectory changed slightly between observations in ways that can't be explained by gravitational interactions with known planets. And it disappeared because it either left the solar system at high acceleration, or it turned off whatever made it reflective, changing its albedo to become effectively invisible. Either explanation requires technology. Natural asteroids don't turn themselves invisible, and they don't accelerate without visible exhaust from rocket engines. What Dr. Yamamoto detected was something that wanted to be seen briefly, perhaps to mark its presence, and then chose to hide. 2 weeks later, on April 17, 2024, a research team analyzing data from the Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite, TESS, discovered an anomaly in light curves from the TRAPPIST-1 system. TESS watches stars continuously, measuring tiny changes in brightness that indicate planets crossing in front of them. The TRAPPIST-1 system has been observed hundreds of times, its 7 planets creating regular, predictable brightness dips as they transit the star. But in April 2024, TESS detected an additional brightness dip that didn't match any of the known planets. The dip lasted approximately 3 hours and reduced the star's brightness by 0.03%, consistent with an object about the size of Earth transiting the star. Dr. Michael Torres at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology was the first to analyze the data. He checked whether an 8th planet might exist in the system, but the timing didn't fit any stable orbital configuration. He considered star spots, dark regions on the star's surface that can mimic transits. But TRAPPIST-1 is a relatively quiet star with few spots, and the dimming curve didn't match the gradual fade characteristic of star spots. The dimming was sharp, geometric, like a solid object passing in front of the star, and then it was gone, never to repeat. When I asked Dr. Torres what he thought it was, he hesitated before saying that the most mundane explanation would be a rogue planet, an orphan world not bound to TRAPPIST-1, but passing through the system by chance. But the timing is interesting, he said. This transit happened just a few weeks after the 3I Atlas transmission, which came from the direction of TRAPPIST-1. If something launched from that system toward Earth, and if it used large objects to demonstrate its presence, you might expect to see perturbations or anomalies in the origin system as well. It's speculative, he admitted, but the coincidence nags at him. The third incident occurred in June 2024, and this one was detected by civilian astronomers, not professionals, which is why it's been harder to suppress. A group of amateur radio astronomers running a SETI project called Breakthrough detected a narrowband radio signal at 982.002 MHz coming from the constellation Aquarius, the direction of TRAPPIST-1. The signal lasted approximately 15 minutes before fading. The frequency isn't as symbolically significant as the hydrogen line, but it's within the range that water molecules emit, another potentially universal marker. The amateurs reported the detection to professional SETI teams, who attempted follow-up observations but found nothing. The signal hasn't repeated. Normally, single detection events are dismissed as interference or false positives because confirming extraterrestrial signals requires repeatability. But the amateurs who detected it swear they verified it came from the sky, not from ground-based interference, and the timing, just 3 months after 3I Atlas, from the same region of space, is suggestive. When I contacted the leader of the amateur group, a retired electrical engineer named Robert Keaton, he told me that his team has been monitoring continuously since June and hasn't heard the signal again, but they're convinced it was real. So we have 4 anomalies in 4 months. A structured radio transmission from an interstellar comet that originated from TRAPPIST-1. A fast-moving object near Jupiter that vanished after demonstrating intelligent maneuvering. An unexplained transit in the TRAPPIST-1 system, suggesting something large moved across the star. And a civilian radio detection from the direction of TRAPPIST-1 that hasn't repeated. Individually, each event has mundane explanations, data artifacts, misidentifications, equipment errors, but together they form a pattern. Something happened between March and June 2024 involving TRAPPIST-1 and our solar system, something that multiple independent observers detected, but that institutions are not acknowledging publicly. Why TRAPPIST-1? If someone is trying to contact us or signal their presence, why use that system as an origin point? One answer is that TRAPPIST-1 is genuinely inhabited, that one or more of those 7 planets hosts intelligent life that's been watching us and decided to make contact. But there's another possibility that's equally fascinating. TRAPPIST-1 might not be inhabited at all. It might just be a convenient landmark, a stellar system interesting enough that we've been studying it intensely since 2017, making it an ideal place to stage a demonstration. Think of it like this. If you wanted to get someone's attention from across a crowded room, you wouldn't just wave randomly. You'd do something near a landmark they're already looking at. A doorway, a painting, something that naturally draws their eyes. TRAPPIST-1 is that landmark. We've pointed countless telescopes at it, written thousands of papers about it, speculated publicly about whether it could host life. If someone wanted us to notice an interstellar communication, they'd send it from a direction we're already watching, using frequencies we recognize as significant, from an object we can't ignore because it entered our solar system. This suggests that whoever is behind this understands human psychology, not just human science. They know what captures our attention, what we consider important, what we're curious about. That's a level of knowledge that implies they've been observing us for a long time, studying our broadcasts, our telescope activity, our scientific literature. We've been watched, analyzed, and then contacted using methods calculated to maximize the chances we detect the signal, while minimizing the chances we panic or respond aggressively. It's first contact designed by someone who understands exactly who we are. Dr. Rebecca Huang at the SETI Institute, who I interviewed on Background, explained that any civilization capable of interstellar travel or communication would almost certainly study target civilizations before making contact. They'd listen to our radio and television broadcasts leaking into space, analyze our internet traffic if they had probes nearby, observe our telescope pointings to understand what interests us. By the time they decided to say hello, they'd know more about us than we know about ourselves. The 3I Atlas transmission isn't a blind message shot into the void, hoping someone receives it. It's a carefully crafted communication designed specifically for humans in 2024, timed and structured to be recognized by people who understand SETI, history, and radio astronomy. That raises an uncomfortable question. If they know us that well, what else do they know? Do they know about our wars, our environmental destruction, our political instability? Do they judge us for how we treat each other and our planet? Are they concerned we're a threat, or do they see us as children stumbling toward maturity? The nature of first contact depends entirely on what they think of us, and we have no idea what their assessment might be. We're not in control of this situation. We're reacting to initiatives taken by intelligences with capabilities and motives we can't fathom. And here's something that should trouble you. If the transmission was meant to be received, if the object near Jupiter was meant to be seen, if all these anomalies were intentional demonstrations of presence, then they succeeded. We detected them. Multiple observatories and researchers confirmed the observations. The data exists, encrypted and distributed among scientists who know what they saw. So why hasn't there been a follow-up? If you go to the trouble of saying hello, wouldn't you expect a response? Wouldn't you continue the conversation? Unless the point wasn't to start a dialogue. Unless the point was simply to announce presence and then watch what we do next. That's the hypothesis that keeps me up at night. That this wasn't first contact in the sense of opening communication. It was notification. Someone telling us they're here, they're watching, they have capabilities we don't, and the choice of what happens next is partly ours. How do we respond to knowing we're not alone and that someone technologically superior is paying attention? Do we try to respond? Do we prepare for the next move? Do we panic, militarize space, treat this as a threat? Or do we continue with our lives, filing the information away as interesting but not immediately relevant, trusting that if they wanted more from us, they'd make it clearer? The institutional response has been to classify and ignore, which is a choice in itself. By not announcing the 3I Atlas detection publicly, by not convening international discussions about what we do if we're being contacted, governments and scientific institutions have decided that the status quo is preferable to confronting this reality. Maybe they're right. Maybe public knowledge would cause more harm than good. Or maybe they're just terrified and paralyzed, buying time while they try to understand something that doesn't fit any existing framework. But I want to talk now about why this matters to you personally, not just as an abstract story about astronomy and possible aliens. Because the existence of other intelligence in the universe isn't just a scientific fact. It's a psychological and philosophical earthquake that changes everything about how you see yourself and your place in reality. And whether or not you believe the 3I Atlas transmission was a message, the question of whether we're alone is something every human being should grapple with seriously. So let me take you through what acceptance of this reality would mean for your life, your worldview, and your sense of meaning. First, think about how you see humanity. Right now, whether you realize it or not, humans are the center of your mental universe. Everything that matters, all the stories, all the history, all the achievements and tragedies, they're human stories. We're the protagonists of the only narrative that counts. The universe exists as backdrop to human drama. That's not arrogance. It's just how consciousness works when you're part of the only intelligent species you know about. You can intellectually accept that other life might exist somewhere, but emotionally, experientially, humans are everything. Now imagine waking up tomorrow to confirmed news that we received a message from TRAPPIST-1, that the 3I Atlas transmission was officially acknowledged as coming from an extraterrestrial intelligence, and that multiple governments confirmed we're in contact, however limited, with a civilization 40 light years away. In one moment, everything shifts. Humans are no longer unique. We're not the only intelligence, not the only technological civilization, not the only species looking up at the stars, wondering who else is out there. We're one among at least two, possibly among millions. The center of your mental universe disappears, replaced by the vertiginous realization that we're a minor player in a much larger story we don't control. That realization would trigger what psychologists call the overview effect, cognitive shift that astronauts experience when they see Earth from space for the first time. Suddenly, national borders seem arbitrary, human conflicts petty, our concerns parochial and small. Except this would be the overview effect magnified 1,000 times. Not just seeing our planet from orbit, but seeing humanity from the perspective of someone 40 light years away who possesses technology we can barely imagine. How small must we seem to them? How fragile and young our civilization must appear? How predictable our behaviors? How limited our understanding? For some people, that realization would be devastating. If you derive meaning from religion that places humans at the center of divine concern, learning that God or the universe cares equally about alien civilizations undermines that narrative. If you derive meaning from humanism, from the idea that human values and human progress are the highest good, learning that we're cosmically insignificant threatens that foundation. If you derive meaning from national identity or cultural superiority, learning that we're all equally primitive compared to spacefaring civilizations erases those distinctions. First contact with superior intelligence is an ego death for the entire species. But it could also be liberation. Think about how much suffering comes from the belief that our tribe, our nation, our species is special and separate from others, justified in competition and conquest because we're the pinnacle of creation. If we're forced to see ourselves as one young civilization among many, those justifications evaporate. We can't claim superiority if someone demonstrably more advanced exists. We can't claim the universe cares more about us if evidence suggests we're one among countless inhabited worlds. The petty divisions that drive human conflict, race, nationality, religion, would seem absurd in the context of cosmic citizenship. We'd be forced to grow up rapidly or face the humiliation of being seen as children by adults watching from the stars. Dr. Douglas Vakook, president of METI International and one of the world's leading experts on the psychology of first contact, has written extensively about this transition. He argues that contact with extraterrestrial intelligence would be the most important event in human history because it would force us to redefine what humanity means. Are we just biological organisms competing for resources on one planet? Or are we something more? A species capable of joining a galactic community? The answer depends on how we respond when confronted with the reality of that community's existence. Here's what will blow your mind. Some researchers believe that humanity has been subconsciously preparing for this moment for decades through science fiction. Every Star Trek episode, every Star Wars film, every novel about first contact in alien civilizations, they're psychological rehearsals. We've imagined countless versions of how contact might happen: benevolent aliens, hostile invaders, indifferent observers, wise mentors. Through fiction, we've explored our hopes and fears about not being alone. When the real moment comes, if it hasn't already, we'll have cultural templates to draw on, stories that help us process the shock and make sense of a new reality. But fiction also misleads us because it tends toward extremes. Aliens are either existential threats that want to destroy us, or benevolent saviors who solve all our problems. The reality is probably more mundane and more complex. Real aliens, if that's what we're dealing with, are likely motivated by concerns we can't fully understand, operating under constraints we don't see, following ethics and goals shaped by evolutionary pressures completely different from ours. They might be curious about us without caring much, the way marine biologists are curious about dolphins, but don't fundamentally change their lives around dolphin concerns. We might be interesting to study, but not important to engage with deeply. That ambiguity is hard for humans to tolerate. We want clear answers. Are they friendly or hostile? Do they want to help us or harm us? Will they share technology or leave us alone? But the universe doesn't owe us clarity. First contact, if it's happening through subtle means like the 3I Atlas transmission, might remain ambiguous for decades or centuries. We might know someone is out there, watching, occasionally signaling, but never get direct answers to our questions. How do you live with that uncertainty? How do you build a civilization knowing you're being observed by judges you can't see, whose standards you don't know? I think the answer is that you live authentically and try to be the best version of humanity you can be, not because someone is watching, but because that's what gives life meaning. If there are aliens studying us, judging us, we can't control what they think. But we can control how we treat each other, how we handle our environment, whether we choose cooperation or conflict, growth or stagnation. In a sense, the awareness of being observed should be motivating. If you knew that everything you did was being recorded and analyzed by a more advanced civilization, would you act differently? Would you be kinder, more thoughtful, less selfish? That's the personal challenge of living in a universe that isn't empty. And here's the thing, even if you're skeptical about the 3I Atlas transmission, even if you think I've misinterpreted the evidence and drawn connections that aren't there, the question remains real. The universe contains billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, many with planets, some of those planets surely habitable. The odds that we're the only intelligence that ever evolved are effectively zero. Even if we haven't been contacted yet, we will be eventually, whether in our lifetimes or in the lifetimes of our descendants. The question isn't if we'll encounter other intelligence, but when and how. And whether it happens now or 1,000 years from now, it will force the same reckoning with what it means to be human in a cosmos we share. So what should you do with this information? First, stay curious. Don't let institutional dismissal or public skepticism shut down your sense of wonder about what's possible. The history of science is full of discoveries that were ridiculed before being accepted. Continental drift, the Big Bang, quantum mechanics. Just because something seems too extraordinary to be true doesn't mean it isn't true. Follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to uncomfortable conclusions. Second, talk about this. Share this video, discuss it with friends, debate the implications. One of the reasons institutions can suppress information like the 3I Atlas data is because public pressure doesn't demand transparency. If enough people started asking questions, demanding that classified astronomical data be reviewed and released, demanding international cooperation on protocols for responding to potential contact, governments would be forced to engage seriously. Change happens when silence becomes impossible to maintain. Third, look up. Spend time under the night sky, thinking about the distances between stars, the age of the light reaching your eyes, the possibility that someone out there is looking back. That perspective shift, from seeing the sky as decoration to seeing it as a neighborhood we don't yet fully understand, changes how you move through life. You become less attached to the trivial dramas of daily existence and more focused on the big questions. What kind of species do we want to be? What legacy are we creating? How would we want to be remembered if someone is watching and recording? But there's something else you need to know, something I've been building toward this entire time. The 3I Atlas transmission might not have been the first attempt at contact. There's evidence, circumstantial but compelling, that similar events have occurred before and been classified or dismissed. That humanity has been probed repeatedly over decades to see if we're ready to acknowledge what's obvious. I'm going to walk you through that evidence now, and by the time I'm finished, you'll see that 2024 wasn't the beginning of this story. It was just the most recent chapter in a pattern that's been unfolding since we first started listening to the stars. Stay with me, because this is where everything comes together. Let me tell you about the WOW signal. On August 15, 1977, Dr. Jerry Emin was reviewing data from the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University when he saw something that made him grab a red pen and write, "Wow," in the margin of the printout. The telescope had detected a strong narrowband radio signal at 1,420 megahertz, the hydrogen line frequency lasting 72 seconds. The signal was 30 times stronger than background noise, came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, and had all the characteristics of an artificial transmission. It's the most famous potential extraterrestrial signal ever detected, and despite decades of follow-up observations, it has never repeated and has never been explained satisfactorily. The official explanation, published years later, is that the signal was caused by a comet passing through the telescope's field of view, though that explanation has been challenged by multiple astronomers who point out that comets don't emit strong, narrowband signals at the hydrogen line frequency. Dr. Emin himself remained skeptical of the comet explanation until his death. But here's what's interesting. The WOW signal came from a region of space that, when you trace trajectories backward, accounting for stellar motion, intersects with several star systems that have since been identified as having potentially habitable exoplanets. The signal might have originated from a source that was using the constellation Sagittarius as a general direction, but was actually much closer, perhaps a probe or relay in the outer solar system broadcasting toward Earth. If you're thinking that sounds like the 3-eye Atlas scenario, you're absolutely right. An object in our solar system, possibly interstellar in origin, broadcasting at the hydrogen line frequency, detected once and never repeated. The difference is that in 1977, we had no way to detect interstellar objects visually. We had no surveys like Atlas that could find comets entering from outside the solar system. If an interstellar probe transmitted the WOW signal and then left it went silent, we would have no way to identify it. We just have the radio data and endless speculation. Then there's the BLC-1 signal detected in 2019 by the Breakthrough Listen project. BLC stands for Breakthrough Listen Candidate, and BLC-1 was a narrowband radio signal at 982.002 megahertz, detected coming from the direction of Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to Earth at 4.2 light-years away. Proxima Centauri has at least 2 confirmed planets, one of which, Proxima Centauri b, orbits in the habitable zone. The signal was detected multiple times over several days in 2019 before disappearing. It showed characteristics consistent with artificial origin, specifically frequency drift, consistent with a transmitter on a rotating planet. Breakthrough Listen spent over a year analyzing the signal before concluding in 2021 that it was likely human-made interference. Though the team admitted they couldn't definitively rule out an extraterrestrial origin, Dr. Andrew Senian, principal investigator for Breakthrough Listen, said publicly that BLC-1 was the most interesting candidate signal they'd found, but without confirmation or repetition, they had to treat it as unconfirmed. Yet here's the thing, 982.002 megahertz is the exact frequency that the amateur radio astronomers detected in June 2024 from the direction of TRAPPIST-1. The same frequency from 2 different stellar systems known to have habitable zone planets 5 years apart. That's either an extraordinary coincidence or the same source using a consistent broadcast frequency. Think of it like this. If you were trying to contact multiple civilizations across the galaxy, you might use the same frequencies for all your transmissions, just like we use standard radio bands for different purposes. The hydrogen line is obviously significant, but maybe 982 megahertz is also significant in some way we don't recognize, perhaps related to chemistry or physics that any technological civilization would discover. Using consistent frequencies would make your transmissions recognizable as part of a pattern once multiple civilizations compared notes. Now let me tell you about something even more disturbing. In 1991, a classified report was submitted to the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency by a contractor analyzing data from early warning satellites designed to detect missile launches. These satellites have infrared sensors that watch for the heat signature of rocket exhaust. The report, which was partially declassified in 2018 under Freedom of Information Act requests, described multiple detections of fast-moving objects entering Earth's atmosphere from space, but not matching the signatures of meteors or space debris. The objects showed controlled deceleration, as if they were braking rather than falling, and several were tracked long enough to show course corrections inconsistent with ballistic trajectories. The report concluded that the detections were likely sensor errors or classified military tests, but it noted that if the objects were real and not human-made, they represented technology far beyond contemporary aerospace capabilities. The report recommended further study, but no follow-up was ever publicly acknowledged. One of the analysts who worked on the report, a retired Air Force officer named Colonel James Whitaker, gave an interview in 2022 where he stated that he believed the objects were real, were under intelligent control, and were of unknown origin. He suggested they might be probes from outside Earth, either extraterrestrial or perhaps launched by a terrestrial breakaway civilization with secret advanced technology. Whether or not you believe Colonel Whitaker, the fact is that our detection systems have been picking up anomalies for decades, and those anomalies have been systematically dismissed, classified, or forgotten. The WOW signal in 1977, the satellite detections in 1991, the BLC-1 signal in 2019, the 3i Atlas transmission in 2024. Each event is separated by years, each is unexplained by conventional science, and each involves potential signs of intelligence. Put them together, and a picture emerges of something probing us, testing our detection capabilities, seeing if we notice, and then withdrawing when we get close to confirmation. Why that approach? Why not just land openly and introduce themselves? Dr. Jill Tarter, former director of SETI research, has speculated that any civilization advanced enough for interstellar travel would probably follow some version of non-interference doctrine, similar to Star Trek's Prime Directive. The idea is that you don't openly contact primitive civilizations until they reach a certain level of technological and social development, because premature contact could be disruptive or harmful. But you might send probes to monitor their progress, and you might occasionally test their detection capabilities to see if they're approaching readiness. That's what the pattern looks like. Intermittent pings, increasing in frequency and sophistication, watching to see when we connect the dots. And maybe we're approaching the threshold. Maybe 2024 is significant because we're finally advanced enough as a civilization to handle the reality of not being alone. We have global communication networks, international scientific cooperation, cultural narratives that have prepared us psychologically through science fiction. We've sent our own probes to other planets, detected thousands of exoplanets, and begun serious discussions about the implications of extraterrestrial life. Perhaps someone watching has decided we're ready for a more obvious signal, hence 3i Atlas and its unambiguous 1679 pulse transmission. Perhaps the next step is ours, to acknowledge what we've seen and signal our readiness for open contact. Or perhaps the timeline is more urgent. Perhaps whoever is watching has seen our environmental destruction, our nuclear weapons, our political instability, and concluded that we're approaching a critical juncture. Many civilizations probably destroy themselves before reaching interstellar capability, victims of their own technology and tribalism. Maybe the Watchers are trying to nudge us toward survival by letting us know we're not alone, hoping that knowledge will inspire us to overcome our divisions. Or maybe they're just documenting our final years, recording what happens when a technological species fails to mature quickly enough. I don't know which scenario is true, But I know this. We're living in a moment of potential transition. Everything we do over the next few decades, how we treat our planet, how we treat each other, whether we choose cooperation or competition, will determine what happens next. If there are watchers, they're paying attention. If there are no watchers, we still face the same choices. The difference is that knowing we might be observed adds stakes to the game, makes our decisions matter, not just for us, but for how we're seen by the universe at large. Let me bring this to a personal level. You watching this video right now are living through possibly the most important era in human history. You're here at the moment when we transition from isolation to awareness, from believing we're alone to knowing or strongly suspecting we're not. That transition doesn't happen with a single event. It's a gradual process of accumulating evidence, shifting public consciousness, and eventually reaching a tipping point where denial becomes untenable. You're part of that process. By watching this, by thinking about these questions, by talking about this with others, you're participating in humanity's awakening to cosmic reality. And that matters because the future isn't predetermined. We have agency. If the 3i Atlas transmission was a message, we can choose how to respond. We can demand transparency from institutions, push for international cooperation on contact protocols, and prepare ourselves psychologically for what might come next. Or we can ignore it, continue with business as usual, and hope that if something more obvious happens, we'll be ready to deal with it then. But history teaches us that societies that ignore warning signs, that refuse to adapt to new realities, don't survive. The universe is sending signals, literally and metaphorically. Are we listening? Here's what I want you to take away from everything I've told you. First, the evidence for the 3i Atlas transmission is solid. Multiple observatories, structured signal, mathematically significant pulse count, originating from an interstellar object with a trajectory pointing back to TRAPPIST-1. That's not speculation or conspiracy theory. That's documented data that exists in classified files and encrypted archives. Whether it proves extraterrestrial intelligence is a conclusion each person has to reach based on their own assessment of the evidence. But the raw facts are not in dispute among those who've seen them. Second, this event fits into a larger pattern of anomalies that suggest we've been probed repeatedly over decades. The WOW signal, BLC-1, satellite detections of anomalous objects, and now 3i Atlas, and the subsequent observations in 2024. Each event alone can be dismissed, but together they form a picture of something methodically testing our awareness. That pattern should concern and excite us in equal measure. Third, the institutional response of classification and denial suggests that those in power are either unprepared for this reality or deliberately preventing public knowledge for reasons we can only guess at. Either way, it means that we, the public, need to demand transparency and accountability. If we're being contacted, everyone deserves to know. If we're not, then the data should be released and the controversy settled. Fourth, the personal and philosophical implications are profound. Accepting that we might not be alone changes everything about how you see yourself and humanity's place in the cosmos. It can be terrifying, humbling, inspiring, or all of those at once. But it's a truth we need to confront, because ignoring it doesn't make it less real. The universe doesn't care whether we're comfortable with the reality it presents. And finally, what happens next depends partly on us. If there are watchers, they're waiting to see how we respond. If there aren't, we still face the challenge of maturing as a civilization and preparing for eventual contact with others. Either way, our choices matter. How we handle this moment, whether we rise to meet the challenge or retreat into denial and division, will define us for generations to come. So let me ask you directly, what do you think? Do you believe the 3i Atlas transmission was a message from extraterrestrial intelligence? Or do you think there's a mundane explanation we haven't found yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if this changed how you see our place in the universe. Tell me if you think we're ready for contact, or if we need more time. And tell me what you think we should do next as a species, because that's not a question with an easy answer, but it's one we all need to be thinking about. If this video has made you question your assumptions, if it's opened your mind to possibilities you hadn't seriously considered, then share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear this. Post it on your social media. Help spread the conversation, because silence serves the people who want to keep this information buried. Knowledge is power, but only if it's shared and discussed openly. Before I wrap up, I want to tell you about one more thing that keeps me awake at night. In July 2024, 4 months after the 3I Atlas transmission, NASA quietly updated the status of their Near-Earth Object Tracking Program. They added a new category to their classification system, Objects of Unknown Origin, or OUO. The category is described in technical documents as being for objects that enter Earth's detection range, but whose trajectories don't match expected profiles for natural solar system bodies or interstellar visitors. In other words, objects that appear to be under intelligent control or that don't follow predictable physics. The creation of this category wasn't announced publicly. It was buried in a technical update to NASA's database infrastructure. I only found out about it because a programmer friend who works with astronomical databases noticed the new fields and asked what they were for. When he inquired with NASA's Near-Earth Object Office, he was told it was a precautionary measure to handle edge cases in the data. But why create a category for intelligently controlled objects unless you expect to catalog some? Why add that infrastructure unless you've already encountered objects that need classification? I reached out to NASA's press office asking about the OUO category and got a terse response saying it was an administrative update for data organization purposes with no operational significance. But I also learned, through sources I won't name, that at least 3 objects have been assigned OUO classification since July. Their data is restricted access, available only to personnel with specific clearances. I don't know what those objects are, where they came from, or what made them anomalous enough to warrant special classification. But I know they exist, and I know NASA created a system to track them quietly without public announcement. That suggests to me that whatever happened with 3I Atlas, it wasn't an isolated incident. It was the beginning of something ongoing, a period of increased activity that NASA and other agencies are tracking, but not discussing publicly. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe those 3 objects are just unusual asteroids or space debris with weird orbits. Or maybe they're more probes, more signals, more tests of our awareness. Maybe the frequency of anomalies is increasing, and we're entering a phase where contact, in whatever form it takes, becomes undeniable. If that's true, then the next few years are going to be historically significant. We might see more detections, more leaks, more whistleblowers coming forward with pieces of the puzzle. Or we might see continued suppression, continued classification, as institutions try to manage the release of information carefully to avoid panic. Either way, something is happening, and you're here for it. You get to witness, maybe participate in, the moment when humanity stops being alone in any meaningful sense and starts being part of something larger. That's both terrifying and incredible. It means we're not the center of everything, that our problems and dramas are small in cosmic context. But it also means we're part of an unfolding story much bigger than ourselves. That consciousness and intelligence aren't flukes unique to Earth, but features of the universe at large. It means the cosmos is alive with minds, with questions, with curiosity similar to ours. And if we can survive our current challenges, if we can mature past our destructive tendencies, we might someday join whatever community exists out there among the stars. I think about that a lot. I think about what it would mean to be part of a galactic civilization, to exchange ideas and art and science with beings who evolved under different suns, shaped by different selective pressures, asking different questions. I think about what we could learn, what we could contribute, what barriers we'd face in understanding each other. And I think about whether we're worthy of that future, whether we've earned the right to join, or whether we're still too violent, too short-sighted, too divided to be trusted with the knowledge and technology that would come with membership. The answer, I think, is that we're not ready yet, but we could be. We have the capacity for wisdom, for cooperation, for transcending our limitations. We've done remarkable things as a species, created art and music and philosophy, explored our planet and beyond, loved deeply and thought brilliantly. But we've also done terrible things, waged war, destroyed our environment, oppressed and exploited each other. We're a species in transition, caught between our animal past and our potential future. Whether we make it through that transition successfully is still an open question. But knowing we might be watched, knowing that someone might be judging whether we're ready, that could be the motivation we need to become better. Not because we want to impress aliens, but because we want to be proud of what we are when seen from the outside. We want to be a civilization worthy of respect, worthy of contact, worthy of survival. And that starts with each of us choosing to be better, kinder, wiser, more thoughtful. It starts with you, watching this video, deciding what kind of human you want to be in a universe that isn't empty. So here's my final challenge to you. Live as if you know we're not alone. Treat every day as if someone is recording humanity's story, and you're one of the characters in it. Make choices that you'd be proud to have observed by intelligences more advanced than us. Be kind because kindness reflects well on our species. Be curious because curiosity is what brought us from caves to space. Be courageous because the universe rewards those who face reality honestly rather than hiding in comfortable illusions. And most importantly, don't forget to look up. Literally and metaphorically. Look up at the night sky and remember that those points of light are suns with their own planets, possibly their own civilizations, maybe their own people looking back at us and wondering. Look up from your daily concerns and remember that you're part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. Look up from cynicism and despair and remember that we live in an age of wonders, where the impossible becomes real almost daily, where the universe reveals new mysteries faster than we can solve old ones. The 3I Atlas transmission, whether you believe it was a message or not, represents a profound question. Are we ready to know we're not alone? I think we are. I think humanity has been waiting for this moment, consciously or unconsciously, for as long as we've been looking at the stars. And I think when the answer finally comes, definitively and undeniably, it won't break us. It'll transform us. It'll force us to grow up, to see ourselves clearly, to take our place as one mind among many in a cosmos rich with consciousness. That's the future I want to live in. That's the reality I'm choosing to accept based on the evidence I've investigated. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to believe that 3I Atlas was a message, or that we're being probed, or that contact is imminent. But I hope you'll at least consider the possibility, hold space for it in your worldview, and think about what it would mean if it were true. Because the universe has a habit of being stranger and more wonderful than we expect, and the biggest mistake we can make is assuming we already know all the answers. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. 3 hours and 20 minutes of your life spent exploring one of the deepest questions humanity faces. That's not time wasted. That's time invested in understanding reality more fully. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person who should be thinking about these questions, who should be part of the conversation about what we do next. So stay curious, stay critical, stay open to wonder. Ask questions, demand answers, and never let anyone tell you that you're not qualified to think about the biggest mysteries we face. We're all qualified because we're all human, and this is about the future of humanity. Whether 3I Atlas was a message or not, whether we're being watched or not, whether contact happens in our lifetime or 1,000 years from now, the question of our place in the cosmos belongs to all of us. And the answer, whatever it turns out to be, will shape every generation that comes after us. One more thing before I end. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because I'm continuing to investigate this story. I have contacts at 3 more observatories who've agreed to talk about anomalies they've observed. I'm working on getting partial declassification of the 3I Atlas data through FOIA requests. And I'm tracking the OUO classifications to see if more objects get added to that category. This isn't over. The story is developing, and I'll bring you updates as I learn more. You don't want to miss what comes next. And one final question for the comments. If you could send a message to whoever or whatever was behind the 3I Atlas transmission, what would you say? How would you represent humanity in a single message? Think about that, write it down, and share it. Because maybe someday, sooner than we expect, we'll have the chance to actually send that message. And when that day comes, we should know what we want to say. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking. Thank you for being the kind of person who cares about truth and wonder and the vast mystery we're all part of. Look up at the stars tonight and remember, you're not just looking at distant suns. You might be looking at someone looking back, and that changes everything.